UFC Fight Night Pavlovich versus Blaydes takes place on Saturday, 2 days from now, in the Apex. 12 fights on the card. We are losing a few, including this one, Yadong Song versus Ricky Simone. That is going to main event, or I think, yeah, it's going to main event next week's card, if I'm not mistaken. So that should be interesting. But for now, we're just going to start at the bottom of the card, make our way all the way up. Starting with Batgarel Dana versus Brady Heastand. I was kind of not worried, but kind of interested as to why the line moved. So it says minus 175 right now for Batgarel Dana on Tapology, but if you look at the odds, Batgarel Dana is down like a minus 140, minus 150. So money's come in on Brady Heastand. Like I said, I'm not entirely sure why. Possibly because he stands younger. Batgarel Dana's 10 years older. He's 33, about to be 34 at bantamweight. So maybe they're thinking, he's Brady Heastand's going to be improving quicker. But when you break down these two guys' skill sets, you'll see that Batgarel Dana can win this fight in his striking, in his power, because Brady Heastand gets dropped. He got dropped by Ricky Tercios, who has zero power. Ricky Tercios is a volume striker, doesn't knock anybody out, and he dropped Brady Heastand. So if that doesn't tell you what you need to know about Brady Heastand's chin, then I don't know what will. His last fight against Bernie Garcia, he also got dropped in the first round. Like, if this dude gets hit clean, he's going to get dropped. I think his chin's very questionable. I think he kind of has a weak chin, because anyone that's getting dropped by both Bernie Garcia, who has 2 knockout wins in his entire career, and Ricky Tercios, it's just not a good look. It's not a good look. He also got knocked out by Chad Anhelinger. Like, the dude has just a weak chin, and I know I keep saying it, but it's true. If you watch his fights, he gets rocked and dropped in every single fight. Batgarel Dana hits harder than pretty much anyone he's fought. I think Batgarel Dana gets this done. I also have to say he's been training at Fight Ready. Fight Ready is one of the best gyms in MMA in this, in the sport right now of MMA. I really think it's, I picked against the Fight Ready last week with Chris Kerr, 2 weeks ago with Curtis and Gastelum. But just looking at it, you're like, you see these guys and they're smart, right? They have game plans. They go in there and they execute them to a high level. They make sure, we're not going in there to, mess around and, trade shot for shot. We're going to, go in there. We're going to play my game. It's not going to be, take one and give one. It's going to be, I'm landing 2, getting out of the way, or, I'm taking you down, I'm controlling, whatever the case may be. They plan very well. He's most likely been training with Cejudo as well, because Cejudo trains out of that gym. So just a lot of things I like to hear. Brady Heastand, like I said, I think he is going to get better. I feel like a few years from now, he can be a really good prospect. But right now, I feel like it's just too early in his career. Plus that really, like, that's the main worry I have for Brady. It's just that the chin is just, he's got a chin problem. He really does. And Batgarel Dana hits really hard. So Batgarel Dana is the pick. I'll say round 2, KO TKO for him. Next up is Priscilla Cachoeira versus Karine Silva. This is one of those fights where people are picking Karine Silva because they say Priscilla's grappling sucks, and I really don't think it's as bad as everyone makes it out to be. If you look at who she's been submitted by, she's been submitted by a very high level competition. And by the way, she only has 2 submission losses in her career. So to those that say, oh, she's a terrible grappler, she's had 16 fights and she's been submitted by Jillian Robertson, who was the same person who submitted Rose Namajunas at Epiuri Grappling in a minute. And Jillian Robertson's coming off a submission win in last week. So Jillian Robertson, I picked Jillian Robertson by submission as well in that fight. Regardless of that, Jillian Robertson, very good grappler, just excellent. Guess who getting submitted by her is not, nothing to laugh at. And then she also, where was it? The Valentina Shevchenko loss, again, not bad. It's Valentina Shevchenko. So those 2 submission losses, not too bad. You look at Karine Silva and you're like, oh, she's getting submissions in all of her fights. She's just going to easily submit Priscilla Cachoeira. Well, go look at who she's fought. I think that'll tell a story a little bit more. Poliana Botelho, not good. Her last fight against a a Chinese girl on the Contender Series who has a good record. You're like, oh, 22-4, she's good. But then you look at who she's fought, and you're like, oh god, she's fought regional bums. She's fought complete nobodies over in China. So not a great look there. If you just look at all of her wins, she fought a 45-year-old. Who else did she fight? An 8-1 opponent who's a pro boxer, 17-24. Like, she's been fighting bums, absolute bums. Priscilla Cachoeira has been in the UFC, fought the highest level of competition you can in Valentina Shevchenko. And I think this is one of those fights where she's being overlooked because people think her grappling sucks. But I wasn't impressed with Karine Silva's grapple. Like, I'm really not that impressed with her skill set. I know she can grapple, and that is the weakness of Priscilla, but the girls that she's out grappling are not good in any regard. And it's not like she's just dominating them. Like, it's taking her, she's not really the best at wrestling, in my opinion, as well. So I just think that people are overrating Karine Silva just because they think Priscilla has no grappling. She's training out of MMA Masters, Priscilla is. So I think that should help her a lot in this fight. Yeah, and really just looking at Karine Silva and who she's fought, she hasn't fought anyone good. She hasn't fought anyone that can throw hands like Priscilla Cachoeira can. And Priscilla, I have to believe that she's been improving her grappling, improving her wrestling over at MMA Masters. So give me Priscilla Cachoeira as an underdog. This is probably one of the tougher ones to pick on the card, in all honesty. I've been really back and forth. Well, a few of these fights are 50-50. This is a tough card to predict, in all honesty. Interesting card to really analyze and break down, though, for that reason. Francis Marshall and William Gomez. What you see out of William Gomez is he's a kickboxer out of France. I mean, you're not getting wrestlers out of France, I'll tell you that. We've seen it time and time again. But Francis Marshall actually is a wrestler, and he's a pretty good wrestler, I would say. Could he win the fight there over William Gomez? I think it's really, really tough to call just because we haven't seen enough of these guys against like a good level of competition to really say like how good, to really like see how good they are. And both these guys have potential, as I've said earlier in the night with Heastand, although I did predict Heastand to lose, like he has potential as well, a young guy. Both of these guys, even if, obviously one of them's going to lose, even the loser of this fight is still, 24 or 25 years old. They still got a lot of, future potential in the UFC, I would think. But right now, I was going to go with Marshall, and that is the guy, like, I'm like, I want to pick Marshall. I want to just say, he's going to use the wrestling and just out-wrestle Gomez. We've seen France wrestling isn't really the strong suit, let's say, as we've seen in the past quite a few times. But I'm looking at it and I'm like, Francis Marshall is just not experienced enough in the game for me to pick him over William Gomez. And I wasn't impressed with William Gomez in his last fight, his first fight in the UFC against Jarno Aarons. I was a little bit more impressed with Marcelo Rojo, in all honesty. So I'll say that right away. But I don't see William Gomez getting knocked out by Francis Marshall. I don't believe William Gomez has ever been knocked out. His strength actually is kickboxing, and he showed a pretty decent wrestling skill set and grappling skill set in his last fight. Even when he was in that really, really tight triangle, he worked his way out of that as well. I think he's a solid fighter. Obviously, Francis Marshall, pretty good himself, but I feel like Gomez is just going to slide around on the outside, move a lot. And if he doesn't get touched up by Francis Marshall, I think he can win a decision. So I'm going to go with William Gomez. Again, Francis Marshall, good fighter. A little bit nervous about this pick, in all honesty, because he is pretty solid, but we'll see how it goes. Next up is Muhammad Usman and Junior Tafa. Give me Junior Tafa to win. I think Junior Tafa gets it done by knockout. I don't think, this one is one of those where it's like, you got a guy, Muhammad Usman. You think he's an excellent wrestler, right? You think can just take anybody down, and he's a brother of Kamaru, right? And he's a heavyweight. He should be able to out-wrestle people. No, he wasn't a wrestler. He is a former football player, actually, a former football player Junior Top is a former kickboxer, glory kickboxer at that, so at least that he's fought a in glory kickboxing and he's only 26 now. He fought in glory kickboxing as a young, like 21, 22 year old, I believe. If you look back at that, he fought in glory way back, starting in 2017. So, long time he's been in there pretty much since he was 21. So, has a lot of kickboxing experience. Muhammad Usman doesn't impress me whatsoever on the feet. Like I said, will he use the wrestling? I think Junior Tafa will be able to defend the wrestling because it's not like Muhammad Usman, some D1 wrestler or anything like that. Muhammad Usman was a good wrestler. I would pick him to win, but I really don't think he is. And if you just look at the size of the guy, I don't think it's going to be really easy to push a high enough pace to be able to just wrestle for 3 rounds against a guy like Junior Tafa. So I'll pick Junior Tafa to win what I believe to be a kickboxing fight because he is the kickboxer. Muhammad Usman does have massive power, though, so he does have to watch out for that. Next up, Carol Rosa and Norma Dumont. I'm picking Norma Dumont. If you look at the level of competition that Carol Rosa's beat, she's got a pretty good record, 16-4, but take a look at some of her fights. Lena Landsberg, majority decision. She got a point taken away in that fight, so that probably explains that, but Lena Landsberg is 40. She loses to Sarah McMahon, who was an Olympic wrestler, but she was 40 years old as well. Before that, she beat Betch Correia, who, guess how old she was? She's 38 now, and the fight was in 2021, so that would have made her 36 or 37 at her prime. She beat Jocelyn Edwards, who sucks, shouldn't have won the fight last week. Absolute disgrace of a decision. I could talk about that. I don't even want to talk about that, actually. The Lucy Pudilova fight where she lost, but the judges gave her the fight somehow. That's not a good win for Carol Rosa, in all honesty, because Jocelyn Edwards isn't good. And she beat Vanessa Mello and Laura Fritzen, both of them, who, again, are not good in the slightest. So she's beaten nobodies, in all honesty. And Norma Dumont, sure, she hasn't really beaten a great level of competition either, but Aspinallad's decent. And she just beat a boxer in a pretty much a boxing match, in all honesty. Like, she beat her on the feet pretty clearly. So I know that she'll probably be the better striker in this fight than Carol Rosa. But women's MMA, anything can happen. We know that by now. And the judges always seem to get it wrong on certain fights, so that could always play a factor as well. Ronnie Yaya and Montel Jackson. Montel Jackson's going to get it done. Ronnie Yaya's just too old, too much of a one-dimensional fighter. Way too one-dimensional for a guy like Montel Jackson, who's in his prime. Good striker, good wrestler. Doesn't necessarily have the grappling skill set of Ronnie Yaya, of course. Ronnie Yaya won ADCC back in 2007. He's a fantastic grappler, but he's too old at this point, I believe, to keep up with the speed, the quickness of Montel Jackson, the striking. Montel Jackson should finish him in this fight. If Montel Jackson does not finish Ronnie Yaya, I think it would be a pretty bad look for him because Ronnie Yaya is, like I said, he's not a good striker. He's a one-dimensional fighter, and he's old, so this is a tee-up fight for Montel Jackson to find a finish. So I believe he will do that. Maybe not the first round, but hopefully second or third round he will find a finish over Ronnie Yaya. Ricky Glenn and Christos Iagos. So I think this fight's going to be a little bit closer than people expect. I don't think Ricky Glenn's just going to run through Christos Iagos. Although Ricky Glenn does have power, as we've seen against Joaquim Silva. He did drop him, and basically finish him with ground and pound. But Christos Iagos, he's training now at a Kill Cliff. He seems to lose whenever he takes a step up in competition. He wins when he fights some of the guys that aren't really UFC level. But when he fights guys, Jakar Close, Arman Sarukian finished him, and then Thiago Moises finished him rather early in the fight, first round. But if you look at it, you're like, okay, those two, especially Arman and Thiago Moises, fantastic wrestler, or fantastic grappler, I should say, and Arman Sarukian, all-around great fighter. More so in the wrestling, but he's got pretty slick, pretty good striking as well, I would say, for Arman. underrated striking. For Ricky Glenn is a guy where the reason why I say this fight can be close is because if it goes to distance, this really could be like a split decision. I believe. I'm not really really confident in Ricky Glenn. The line has actually dropped a little bit. It's not minus 210 anymore. Ricky Glenn's like a minus 170. So people are believing in the skill set of Christos Giagos. But I do believe Ricky Glenn also has a better cardio. So if the fight goes past the first round and Giagos can't find a finish or anything like that, I believe it will actually be a lot better for Ricky Glenn. He should be the better grappler in this fight as well. He's a jiu-jitsu black belt. He survived against Grant Dawson. And that Grant Dawson fight, Grant Dawson was in big trouble in that third round. He was gassed completely. Ricky Glenn started to take over and dominate the third round. Won a 10-8 round in the third, but, obviously first two went to Dawson, so it was a draw. But losing to Grant or having a draw to Grant Dawson is like looking back on that, and that was a year and a half ago. It's like, dude, Grant Dawson's a really good fighter. So it's like, I give him a lot of credit for getting a draw on that one. And by the way, one other thing I want to mention before, and the pick is going to be Ricky Glenn, if I didn't already mention. One other thing I want to say about that Grant Dawson fight, he could have gotten Grant Dawson could have got submitted by Ricky Glenn if there was 5 more seconds on the clock. He was in a nasty darce, and that I'm telling you that, like, Grant Dawson, Ricky Glenn said that Grant Dawson was out. He said he choked him out, and Dawson was saying, no, I was just tired. But it looked like Grant Dawson was like, he could have been out for a second there. Like, the fight could have been, it wouldn't have been stopped because it was the final second of the fight. But like I said, there's 5 more seconds. There's a chance that Ricky Glenn wins that fight. So that's all I got to say about that. Ricky Glenn should overall be the better fighter at this point, but Giagos is training at a pretty good gym. I wouldn't, invest heavily on Ricky Glenn. To kick off the main card, we have Jeremiah Wells taking on Semi the Jedi, Matthew Semmelsberger. And the pick is going to be Jeremiah Wells. Jeremiah Wells getting it done. And I was actually really tempted to pick Matthew Semmelsberger at first. I was like, man, and the line actually closed on all these lines have changed a lot. Jeremiah Wells is now, it's a pick 'em now. Instead of Jeremiah Wells being a favorite, the odds are even. I think minus 115 or minus 110 on both guys. But when I look at it, I'm like, all right, Matthew Semmelsberger, pretty good fighter. He had a great fight against Jake Matthews, great win there. But when you break down that fight, and he did drop Jake Matthews, but he also got caught quite a few times. And by quite a few, I mean he got caught a ton against Jake Matthews with counter left hooks. He got caught with more than one, at least 3 that I counted or more counter left hooks when Semmelsberger was coming in. He got caught by Jake Matthews, who doesn't have the power of a Jeremiah Wells. Jeremiah Wells he's got filthy power in his hands. And that's when I saw the tape and I saw Semmelsberger get cracked by left hooks against Jake Matthews. I was like, I don't think this dude can take a left hook by Jeremiah Wells, because Jeremiah Wells hits like a truck. He's also a jiu-jitsu black belt. Not that I think this fight will play out too much in the grappling. I feel like just in the striking, Wells is going to be the guy that's throwing big bombs. Every single punch he throws is with vicious intention. He's training with excellent fighters in Philly, in that Daniel Gracie gym, with guys like Joe Pyfer even. I saw a picture on Instagram of him sparring with Joe Pyfer a few weeks back. I'm like, Joe Pyfer is definitely the guy you want to spar with if you're fighting Matthew Semmelsberger. That's actually the perfect guy to spar with, because I think Joe Pyfer is definitely a lot better in the striking, I believe, than Matthew Semmelsberger. And I think that's a perfect, just kind of a perfect kind of comparison as far as, Pyfer and Semmelsberger, both bigger guys, both guys that, have a lot of similarities in some ways. Like I said, I do think Pyfer's a lot better overall than Semmelsberger, but that is a good training partner to have for this fight. And I think Jeremiah Wells gets it done. I think his grappling is better, although, like I said, I don't think it'll take place in the grappling. I just think If Jeremiah Wells touches his chin, he's going to be in for a rough night. Semelsberger has power of his own, though, so Wells has to watch out. He has to be careful. But I just think Wells has more of that one touch. Just, he hits you clean on the chin, you're going to sleep. And I think he can do that to Semelsberger, because Semelsberger, although he seems to have a chin, some of his fights he gets hit clean, but this is like a different level, I believe, of power. So I'm picking Jeremiah Wells to get it done. Next up is Yasmin Lucindo versus Brogan Walker. Walker and Lucindo. I think this is a pretty clear-cut and dry fight as far as what's going to happen. I say that, and you know what'll happen next. Brogan Walker will actually win, but no. Lucindo should absolutely win this fight, like 100% of the 99% of the time. She should win this fight. I say not 100 because anything can happen in martial arts. And this, MMA is so unpredictable at times. But Lucindo is a much better fighter. She's 21 years old. Brogan Walker. This is one of those fights the UFC knows what they're doing. When you look at a fight like this, you're like, all right, the UFC knows this is a setup fight. They want this person to win. They're giving them a winnable matchup. And sometimes you don't have to overthink it, Some fights are like where you're like, oh man, this is close, this is competitive. This one is like, they're giving Lucindo, after she had a really good fight in her last fight against a good prospect in Yasmin herself, now she's coming back and fighting a way worse fighter in Brogan Walker. This should be a clear win for Lucindo. UFC, like I said, doing her not really, I guess you could say doing her a bit of a favor here by giving her a much easier matchup. As far as a winnable matchup, Brogan Walker, not good. Just got ground and pounded 7 months ago by a 2-1 Juliana Miller. I just think Lucindo, more experience, actually 21 years old, but has way more experience than Brogan Walker. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. It's going to be Lucindo, and it's going to be clearly Lucindo as well. Next up on the main card, I believe this is the featured fight of the night. It is Bobby Green and Jared Gordon. Give me Bobby Green, and I'll say by decision because Jared Gordon's tough. I don't think Jared Gordon's going to get knocked out. I would say it would probably be Bobby Green just piecing him up at range, using his boxing. Bobby Green is excellent boxing. Bobby Green is just an awesome striker. I really like watching Bobby Green. Everyone likes Bobby Green, you know what I mean? He's just one of those guys that's like, he fights, you tune in, you watch. Jared Gordon, I don't want to say he's like molasses on the feet, but he's not a quick striker. He doesn't have the speed. I think Bobby Green's going to have a speed advantage. I think Bobby Green's going to be way better on the feet. I think Bobby Green's going to be able to defend any of the grappling that Jared Gordon will initiate. I just think Bobby Green's all around the better fighter. I think the line indicates that. Bobby Green's a big favorite. The only way I see Jared Gordon winning this fight is if he kind of holds Bobby Green against the cage, similarly to like the Paddy Pimblett fight. Although I just don't see it happening. I think Bobby Green, his movement's just too good. His movement's too good. He moves his head really good as well. I don't think Jared Gordon's fast enough to even touch him, or at least clip him the way that Drew Dober did. Drew Dober clipping him and knocking him out is like, it's really not as bad as, it might look. You're like, oh, he's 36, got knocked out 3 months ago, and he's back. He got knocked out by Drew Dober after dominating Drew Dober in the first round, completely outclassing him. And then the second round, winning the fight up until Dober pressed him against the cage and landed just a perfectly timed left on the chin of Bobby Green. It happens. It's part of the sport. Sometimes you get hit right on the chin, you go down. But the better fighter in this matchup is Bobby Green. He most likely will win this fight by decision, like I said, because Jared Gordon, Green is a guy that he's, he'll beat you over 3. He doesn't need to finish, try to find a finish or work for it. He'll just use his, precise boxing to just piece you up and win on points. And I think he'll do that in this fight. Co-main event is Brad Tavares versus Bruno Silva. Oh man, I'm picking Brad Tavares because Bruno Silva, I can't watch you get dropped badly by GM3 and then get submitted right after and then pick you to win against an opponent like Brad Tavares, he's training out of Extreme Couture. Brad Tavares training with Strickland, Curtis, Marvin Vettori, Magomed Ankalaev. Who else? There's other guys I'm forgetting, but those training partners are elite training partners. Who's the other guy? Punahele Soriano. There's others I'm probably forgetting, like I said, but those training partners are all very high level. Can give you looks in different departments. Although this fight, it's going to be on the feet. It's going to be a stand up fight. Tavares isn't, he's not an offensive wrestler. Bruno Silva, I don't think is going to try to shoot any takedowns for that matter either. So in the striking, who do I think wins? Well, I don't think Bruno Silva finds the knockout, because who has Bruno Silva knocked out in the UFC, or who has he beat in the UFC? Jordan Wright, Andrew Sanchez, and Wellington Turman. Especially, Jordan Wright, he's been how many times has Jordan Wright been knocked out? I want to check that. Not that that really matters to this fight, but Jordan Wright's been knocked out 3 times now. Lost to Dusko. That was more of a grappling. That was more in the grappling, but and Marc-Andre Barriel, and Joaquin Buckley. I didn't see that one. Either way, though, that doesn't really matter or pertain to this fight at all. But I just wanted to say, because his knockouts aren't really aging well, is really why I went into that. His knockouts aren't really aging as good as you would think. Brad Tavares fought amazing competition, way better competition. And although, yes, Bruno Silva did fight Alex Pereira, and he did fight, Mearshart, but Alex Pereira, really, the best competition he's fought. Alex Pereira beat him. But if you look at Brad Tavares, he's fought Adesanya, Edmund Shabazian, Antonio Carlos Jr. is in the PFL now. Doing very good in the PFL, though. Omari Akhmedov, he was a ranked guy. I think ranked 15 or 14 for a while, so decent opponent as well. And then loses to, and he beat those two as well. And then loses to Dricus du Plessis, who's one fight away from a title shot. So it's you look at his losses, he's only losing to pretty good competition that is, a lot better than that of a Bruno Silva, who got knocked out by Mearshart. If you get knocked out, or he didn't get knocked out, but he got dropped, club and subbed. If you get club and sub by Mearshart, I'm not trusting you against a guy like Brad Tavares. I'm picking Brad Tavares to get it done. And then in the main event of the evening, it is Sergey Pavlovich versus Curtis Blaydes. It's tempting to pick Pavlovich as an underdog. It is tempting, and I understand why people would do it. They would say Pavlovich first round, going to knock Blaydes out. Blaydes has been knocked out before. But I don't think it's a matter of Blaydes having a bad chin. I really don't think it's a matter of him having a bad chin. I think it's a matter of Derek Lewis caught him at the perfect time. And I mean, when Derek Lewis knocked him out, he landed probably one of the best time shots ever. I mean, he found that uppercut. And sure, maybe Blaydes was showing the takedown before, but the shot that he landed was just devastating. Put Curtis Blaydes out right away. Do I think Sergey Pavlovich is going to be able to do the same thing? I don't necessarily think so. I think Curtis Blaydes will be able to get the wrestling going and win this fight. Pavlovich, I think this is like a wrestler versus, a striker type of fight. And I'm picking the wrestler in this instance. I'm picking the guy that has the better wrestling, is able to push a pace, able to he'll go 5 hard rounds, or, even if he gets tired, he'll still, keep working the takedowns. And I think Pavlovich, if he doesn't find that first round knockout, he's going to get tired. He's going to get gassed. He's not going to have the same power as he once did. And I think Blaydes is going to take over in that instance. Now, I think Blaydes might even be able to find a finish earlier on. I'd say maybe even second or third round. If Blaydes gets it done, I would expect it to be a second or third round finish for him. Just, outpacing Pavlovich, taking him down, maybe land some ground and pound, ref pulls him off. But, I could see it happening in the first round as well. If you look at Pavlovich's only loss in MMA, it was to Alistair Overeem in the first round via ground and pound. So it's he has that that blemish on his record due to the wrestling, due to being out grappled, out wrestled. So it's like, could the same thing happen against Blaydes? I'm gonna say it does. I can't pick against Blaydes just for the small chance that he gets knocked out trying to shoot a takedown again. So the pick is going to be Blaydes to win. Probably, I believe this fight will be finished inside the distance, regardless of who wins. But I do believe it will be Blaydes that gets it done. So those are all the fights for UFC Fight Night in the Apex. Pavlovich versus Blaydes. Pretty good card coming up. A lot of close fights, a lot of interesting fights to break down, as mentioned. But thank you guys very much for watching, and peace out.